This is Sky News with Samantha Simmons.
Good afternoon. The father of Damilola Taylor has called for a public inquiry after one of his son's killers was recalled to jail for a second time just 16 days after being released from prison. Ricky Priddle was jailed for 8 years in 2006 for the manslaughter of the 10-year-old. Sky correspondent Neil Patterson is at Scotland Yard. Neil, questions as to why he was released so soon after being recalled.
Indeed, I think no real surprise that the father of Damilola Taylor, Richard Taylor, has called for a public inquiry to try to get to the bottom of exactly why this individual, having been released on licence, one, breached those licence conditions, returned to jail, and then released on parole a second time, was allowed again to breach those conditions, this time within a matter of just over two weeks. Quite clearly, there is a vast difference between calling for a public inquiry and actually obtaining one, although one has to say, given the high-profile nature of the Damilola Taylor case and indeed the troubles that his family have had since his death, there will be quite a lot of public support and indeed political support for that inquiry. I mean, it was back in the year 2000 that Damilola Taylor was killed just a short distance from his home as he returned home from the library. Indeed, just a few short months after his family arrived in the United Kingdom to try and seek a better life. It was then 6 years before convictions were obtained of Ricky Priddle and his brother Danny for the killing of Damilola Taylor. That conviction only obtained when forensic evidence previously missed was rediscovered. Since that point, Ricky Priddle has been released first in September 2010. He was then returned to prison of March of last year. We were told at the time, because he had entered an exclusion zone, essentially a part of London, that as part of the conditions of his release he was told he was not allowed to. He socialised with individuals, again, that he was told he was not to. And then you have a mirror of that situation happening, as I mentioned, just a few days after his release at the tail end of January. Richard Taylor wants to get to the bottom of exactly why the parole board took its decision, but of course they now have another decision to make, exactly how long Ricky Priddle will now remain in prison.
So what are the Ministry of Justice saying about this?
Well, strangely enough, the Ministry of, unsurprisingly enough, I should say, the Ministry of Justice are saying very little on this case, aside from pointing out that when a prisoner released on parole is taken back into custody, it is a decision for the parole board and the parole board alone as to how long they will remain in prison. Think about it this way, however. Ricky Priddle served an extra 9-10 months in prison after his release because of the breach of those bail conditions. His sentence comes to a conclusion some 14 months from now. I think on the family's part, they will wish to see him complete that sentence with no possibility for parole. But again, this is a decision for the parole board, which should be made at some point in the next 4 weeks.
Neil, for now, thank you. Residents